Hello, you're watching the Nouvel Esprit video series on the theology of the body. This video is dedicated to audience 60. We are your hosts. I am Jeremy Hossotter.
And I'm Guillermo Moreno.
So audiences 60 through 63, they are the appendix to chapter 2 of part 1. And the theme of this is aesthetics. In particular, what role does the human body have in art and culture? And so this is a question that will take us up through the remaining 4 audiences of this chapter. So to dive in, we first want to make a note on JPII's method. We need to note that there are 2 dimensions with regard to the body. You have the objective reality of the body, and you have the subjective side. You have man's consciousness of his body and his experience of the body. And both of these dimensions are found in scripture. So when we looked at Christ's appeal to the beginning, that's a reference to Genesis 1 through 3. Well, when we looked at Genesis 1, we got kind of this objective view. Man is a being within the cosmos that's created, who has a body, who is made in the image and likeness of God. Even in chapter 2, we discovered more of the objective reality of man as being made with the Spirit of God, his breath, and dust. So you have this body soul unity. And all these facts also came into play in how man experienced his body and the truth of that objective reality. And so both of these dimensions, they require theological analysis, and that's what we've been doing for the last 60 audiences. And now we are going to transition towards culture as part of this subjective experience of the body within a new sphere, within a new set of questions. So let's see here. Okay. So the role of culture. So culture or cultural works, they allow the dimensions of the body and experiences of the body to extend beyond the sphere of living persons, because now you can interact with the body and the truth about the body through, say, a painting or a work of literature. And so through these cultural products, man can experience the reality and the truth about the body. So, and to be clear now, when man is looking at these works of art, we call that aesthetic experience. So the aesthetic experience is that looking at a work of art, and this includes looking at the body in the works of art. And aesthetic experience is going to cause a problem now that demands our attention, because we've talked about how man cannot be objectified through concupiscent desire, because that is a taking of man and the truth of the body outside of the truth of the human person, in violation of man's dignity, and this disintegration of the sexual value away from the value complex of the human person. And aesthetic experience raises an important question, because now the human body is objectified, and it is being objectified in a way outside of this sphere of living persons, outside of how we've been talking about the body, about how we relate to others, with this gift of self, this communion of persons, how we have to live this life of chastity. That's the dimension we've been talking about, but now we have a kind of objectification through the experience of art that objectifies man and his body, but in a different manner. And now, what JP2 will claim is that the aesthetic look, this looking at a work of art, cannot be isolated from consideration of the concupiscent look that we've discussed in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 28, where we talked about how the man who looks at the woman with this concupiscent desire makes a or he commits adultery with the woman in his heart. And it's precisely this problem of the heart and concupiscent desire that needs to be asked in regards now to art and the role of the body. And so, one thing we could note just immediately, based off our previous analyses of the other audiences of this chapter, is that one of the duties of culture and art is that it needs to be integrated within this ethos of the body. And this means creating a cultural climate of purity. And so purity can be threatened by various works of art. I think we should think of the term art in this case in a broad sense, okay? We'll have to narrow down what is meant by art as we progress through these four audiences. And so the question is how to understand the body as an object of culture in light of the ethos of the body. And Guillermo, do you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
Quite a bit. For one, I want to highlight the point about that the aesthetic look cannot be isolated from consideration of the concupiscent look. In other words, because of our this and because of art's depiction of the human body, we can't quite help but experience concupiscence when we're visually experiencing the body, just for lack of other words off the top of my head. So that fallenness, it's there even in something that is yes, okay, even in something that is just so inherent in culture, art. And then the point after that about creating a climate of purity, that sounds like quite a challenge. And of course, concupiscence will always be there. And insofar it's always there to build a climate of purity, okay, that is a huge mountain to climb over, because, well, we all experience concupiscence, and in some way, shape, or form. And like you said, art, we'd have to use it broadly, even though, and I don't want to jump the gun just yet, but our culture, ours is a culture of death. What we're looking at is a very, I can't quite find another way to put it, a very consumership culture, where the art that is going to be generally provided is, quote unquote, what the people want. And unfortunately, what we're prone to is sin, and sexual sin above all. And, well, maybe not above all, but in terms of art, that's just, quote unquote, what the culture wants. Artistically wise, that's something that it's hard to see it changing. but not that it can't, of course not.
Yeah. I think we just go back to kind of this advertising principle. Sex
Yes,
sells.
yes. Okay, there, that. Okay, that's the phrase I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, Jeremy.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. And we'll
Yes,
have to return to this question about kinds of art.
yes,
We'll have to make some distinctions. All right. So the body, we must know, has been a perennial object of culture since time, pretty much ever since beginning of human history. You got the caveman drawings, you got your drawings on cuneiform, you got throughout human history, the human body has been a subject of culture. And more precisely, we could say that man is the subject of culture. And because man is the subject of culture, his humanity and his body is also the subject of culture. And man uses his body and his humanity to create culture. So, and we'll just note that JP2 wants to restrict the phrase object of culture to be defined in terms as the subject of works of art and particular works of art. That was a restriction of terminology that he made. And we also want to make a distinction between the living body, which creates the work of art, and the body as the model of the work of art. So in other words, you have the painter who has a body and he is creating the painting. And then you have the subject, the model, the naked woman who he is painting in the in his picture. So we have a couple conceptual points to make here that you want to keep in the back of your mind, especially this second distinction in here. So now with that, we want to proceed to another distinction between film and photography on the one hand and painting and sculpture on the other. So the question is whether film and photography are of the same kind of work in art the work of art as painting and or sculpture. And JP2 argues that there is an essential difference. And so when we talk about painting and sculpture, the body remains a subject or a model that is subjected to reworking by the artist. And this process JP2 calls transfiguration. So again, when we are talking about a model in painting or sculpture, you have the naked model right there, but you have the artist who's giving the model his own interpretation. He's working with the model to create something that, yes, will resemble the naked person that he is model that is the model, but it's also changed, it's transfigured, it's interpreted by the artist. And so you have what JP2 calls this process of transfiguration. With film and photography, on the other hand, they do not undergo this process of transfiguration. The model is not transfigured, but is instead reproduced. The model, the body is a object for reproduction through technology. You use your camera, you click, take the picture, boom, there's your work of art, so to speak. Yes, you can use Photoshop, you can do your edits, you can make your video and you do your video editing, but at the end of the day, the body itself is something that's just reproduced. You have this audio visual reproduction of the body. And it's not a reworking like the artist who is a painter or a sculptor who's taking this model and he's reimagining it through reworking it with his hands, using paint, using the chisel and the stone or clay if he's using clay. With film and photography, there is always technology involved. Even if, say, someone wanted to object and say, well, what about 3D modeling? You know, people make cartoons. Why not a naked body? And say, like, some kind of 3D animation, whether it's a video game or a TV show. And you still have this point of it's still a technological process. You're using algorithms, you're using machines to generate this thing that is a representation of the naked body. And while there is in some respect a artistic interpretation, it is always a reproduction of the object through technology. It's not this process of transfiguration. But similarly, you could use the lighting, the aperture. You can change various filters on your camera, adjust the settings to try and capture and interpret the naked model in a particular light or manner. But at the end of the day, you're trying to capture something with a reproduction, even though you're reinterpreting, in a sense, what it is you're taking the picture of. So in general, to sort of summarize, with painting and sculpture, you have this process of transfiguration that is absent with photography and film or 3D animations and modeling, because with those other processes, what you have is a reproduction through technology. And so this process of reproduction means that you have a essential difference between these as art forms. And so you have painting and sculpture that will be a higher form of art because of the medium, the things that are used to create those, versus something that is made primarily through technology. This is not to say that videos and photographs cannot be art. It's just it's art in a different sense than when we say a painting is art. There are still aesthetic values associated with great film and great photos, but not necessarily the same. It's not necessarily art in the same sense as we would say a painting or music is art. So the problem then is when you have um, this process of artistic reproduction instead of transfiguration, then this process, through the technology, it becomes a problem of representation and transmission, and a fundamental contact with the body is lost. So when we start talking about the introduction of film, photography, 3D animations, etc., there's a fundamental contact with the body, or a primordial contact that you have with painting that you lose once you introduce technology. And part of the consequences of this loss of contact is that the body now becomes a thing that is now an anonymous object that can be transmitted. You think about pornography, you just get these pictures of the man and the woman or whatever, and they're just anonymously transmitted. They're sent out on the World Wide Web for anyone to download and watch and like consume. There's a anonymity that is introduced, an anonymous objectification. And this anonymity is the effect of spreading these images, these video clips, these animations. And this anonymity is in essence different from the process of transfiguration found in art models through painting and sculpture. Now, if you are been intrigued by this distinction between painting and film, there's actually a parallel text that I highly recommend. It is Dietrich von Hildebrand's Aesthetics, Volume 2, Chapter 20, where he goes into more depth that this distinction precisely between photography and painting. And cannot recommend highly enough the Aesthetics of Hildebrand. As I said, it's a 2-volume work, and each volume is about 500 pages. So it is a massive work, over 1,000 pages. Highly recommend, though, for anyone interested in aesthetics. Guillermo, do you have anything you like to add about this distinction?
Just to kind of repeat what you mentioned about the difference between paintings and sculptures versus film and photography. When it comes to the latter works, it's essentially a copying. And on top of that, an electronic device does the copying for you. As opposed to what I would loosely say is called a product. So a product meaning the end result of a particular work of labor, in this case, a work of art. Here's my sculpture, here's my painting, here's my drawing, as opposed to here's the photo I took of that over there. And of course, and yeah, just the topic of and beauty, they're two very distinct topics. So a beautiful photograph or a beautiful footage of something, yet it has its aesthetic value, but very different than painting or sculpting something. And when it comes to 3D modeling and so forth, yeah, I would say that there's such a I guess that's what we mean by digital arts or digital media arts. And well, as such, okay, there's the key word digital, where there's this different means that just at some point there's no it's too different from painting and sculpting.
Yeah, I think what helps in describing that difference is you're using technology to do the modifications. You're telling technology to do it, but technology is doing the modifications. Whereas with painting, you're the one who's doing the modifications with your paintbrush,
Awesome.
right? There's that kind of existential contact between you and the painting that is lost because with the film or whatever, you don't have that immediateness. It's always has to be you always have a intermediary, and that intermediary is always technology. Yeah. Guillermo, did you have any last thoughts or comments to share with our listeners?
I do not.
Okay. With that then, um, I want to say thank you for watching our video. If you have been enjoying our content, please like, subscribe, and share our social media such as Facebook and YouTube. And also, please consider making a financial donation through PayPal or Patreon, or simply by giving us a tip through the Brave web browser on our website or YouTube page. Your financial support goes towards the maintenance of our website and our ability to purchase resources so that we can continue providing you with great materials such as this video series and our many articles on our website. You can check out our articles on nouvelesprit.com, and there we also have a podcast. Guillermo, can you give us some more information about our podcast?
Yes, in our other podcast series, we talk about a variety of topics, such as trends in culture and politics, and we do so from a Catholic personalist perspective. You can listen to our podcast episodes on the Nouvel Esprit website in the podcast page under media, and or you could also use that page to locate us on buzzsprout.com, where you could listen to us there. That's where we upload our episodes. Or you can use Buzzsprout to locate us in other popular podcasting platforms, such as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
In case you've got lost as to where all of our social media is, you can simply go to lenovelesprit.com/subscribe. There you can find our Facebook, YouTube, our PayPal, Patreon information, our podcast information, every single website our podcast is distributed on, and even more things. Again, that is at lenovelesprit.com/subscribe. Do you have anything else for us, Guillermo?
I would just like to ask our audience to keep us and our mission in your prayers.
Yes, please pray for us. We are in gratitude for your prayers. And with that, we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone. God bless.